Welcome to the JAMODI podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it. Coaches, the JAMODI podcast is powered by Ballogy. Manage and measure your players' skill development and increase accountability year-round utilizing the Ballogy app. Boost inter-squad competition with drills backed by the National High School Basketball Coaches Association, including a 40-shot Ballogy skills assessment. Please visit ballogy.com/teams for information on how you can provide this resource for your team. Every time I want to talk about culture with a coach, I always think of Porter Moser's little clip where he said, I said the word culture. Now I'm going to show up on tons of memes or anything about how culture, because that word is used so much. But it is important, and it is important to know because everybody has one. It's either going in the direction that you want or it's slipping the opposite way. And so in your opinion, how does it drive performance?
Well, the funny thing is I've been in a bunch of different, obviously I'm was super fortunate here at LaPoynor. The culture, the expectation is to win. When you come to here, it is built in it's the DNA. We've honored our so the last 2 years. So we had a team in 1972 that won state, 1973 that won state, 1974 that got beat in the state finals, and 1975 won state. So we've honored the 72 and 73 team, the 50-year thing at a game. Well, one of the players on that team was a granddad of a kid that was playing for me. So that is just like it's ingrained.
Yeah,
that's just an expectation. They won state in those, and they won state in 1985. They won state in 95.
Oh wow,
won state in 2020. And so it's just one of those that it's just kind of built in now. I've been at another spot that didn't win anything, and the culture that was permeated was a losing culture. And to trying my hardest to change that, and there were several coaches, it wasn't just me, that were trying to change that, and that's a difficult piece. But the most interesting one, as far as performance goes, was when I opened up the new school, was when I had that opportunity, because it was all on me.
Yeah.
The basketball. As the leader of the program, what I mean by that was I couldn't say, well, we've got to either continue what's been done or we got to change what's been done.
It's just a bad culture here, guys, that we're trying to overcome.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that, like I said, I think some of these kids here, there is a pressure. There's a community pressure, not spoken.
Yeah.
It's just the kids feel it. And it's not, pressure's not a right word, expectation, a community expectation to be successful. Now, success here looks different than success somewhere else, obviously. But I think that in of itself will drive kids to either not do it or do it extremely well. I think that it kind of puts that divide. We don't have very many kids, especially that are getting the upper JV level or varsity level, that do not. It's just they're just doing it just to do it. Where they understand that if I'm going to do it, I better do it right. Or I better not do it. And so there's that part of it. I think that's how culture can drive it. And I think on the other end of it, why, if I'm in a losing culture, why on earth would I try hard when all we're going to do is lose anyway? And so trying to get kids to buy into that's a difficult piece too. And so culture can be on both sides of it. But I think that if you have the correct culture, you have the correct idea of it, then I think it's almost self-feed. It feeds itself.
Yep.
And it's going to feed itself one way or another. And turning it it's tough. It's tough. I've tried it, and I've tried it 2 separate times. One place I was only 1 year there, and another place I was 5 years there. And it was difficult. It's one of the most difficult things to do. Now, maintaining the culture or maintaining a positive culture, winning culture, as long as you work hard and you love what you're doing, it's not as difficult. Now, you're going to feel a lot more pressure. At those other 2 places, I didn't feel any pressure to win. There wasn't any pressure. But now I feel there's, whether it's and majority of it's self-imposed, right?
Sure.
We put that pressure on ourselves. There's nobody ever been anywhere that said, if you don't win this game, you're going to you're not going to have a job next year. I've never felt that, but I do feel like a certain obligation to give my best because the expectation is to win.
I wrote that phrase down. The expectation is to win, because there are those communities out there, Highland Park, Lipan, so many others that I don't even know about or can't, but where it is just they're born knowing those. A lot of it has to do with home. A lot of it has to do with the community and the success that they've had before. And you have other coaches that, and I've felt this way before. If I was at a place like that, man, then the culture would be really good. To your point of being kind of on both sides of it, let's say you are going either into a place where it's been bad, or you realize that there needs to be a shift at your own school. What are some ways that we can create that idea of the expectation is to win?
I think the part of it is, I think there's so many different aspects, really thinking into it. But I think one of the big pieces, and it's a big push right now, I think, with more so in coaching than I've ever been. Like I said, I've spanned 30 years of it, and then with my dad doing it, I've been involved and been around with it. But building relationships, I think there's a big focus on that right now. But I think there's a separation. There's a difference between building a relationship as a coach to a player and a friend to a player. I think there's I see a lot of things that, they're trying to turn things around. And so we want to make sure the kids are, with us but it becomes more of almost a friend situation, because you want the kids to be excited to be out there, right? You want them to, if they're not out there and they're not working hard, they're not going to win. So you want them to be excited to do that, but you have to be careful how you get there. How do you get there? Do you get there by being their buddy and rah-rah and being on their side all the time? And then there's going to be inevitably going to become a time when you've got to make a decision that's tough.
Yeah.
And they're going to be like, well, my friend wouldn't make that decision. No, your friend wouldn't make that decision. Your coach would make that decision. And then all of a sudden now the dynamic switches. So that's a hard piece. But I think building that relationship, and a lot, like I said, it goes back to the flipping stuff. I don't know if you ever heard flipping. Always, he does stuff with with schools about greet them at the door and always be. It's a different environment in a classroom than on the basketball court. Sometimes I know that the kids see me in class and they'll say you're not like that on the basketball court. Players, I'm like, no, I'm not. It's a little different scenario, but and I really looked over my years, probably the last 5 or 6 years, and really like, why is that? Why am I'm never their buddy. I'm never, and it's not that I'm trying to distance myself from them, but I looked and I thought, and I realized that when I started coaching, my first year coaching was 1994, 95. There were no cell phones, none at all. And so the reason, and that's not speaking of how the kids are on phones. That doesn't speak to that at all. But when we took a kid on a bus and we took them 2 hours away to play a basketball game and we drove them back to the school, we were their parent.
Yeah.
We were the ones that were in charge, because their parents couldn't be on the phone with them. Their parents couldn't track them. Their parents couldn't tell how fast the bus was going. Their parents couldn't be in contact. So we were the ones. So at a young age, at 24, I'm their parent. And I got 17, 18-year-old kids that I'm having to, I'm only 6 years older than them, but I've got to have that parent role. So I was taught, that kind of was ingrained in me as a coach early. So that's just the way I developed over the years. And then now, a lot of the younger coaches that have been at it for 2-3 years, they don't know how to be the parent, because they're basically just a sponsor sometimes, and in the way that the kids' parents know exactly where they are. They're on the phone with them. They know when to get there.
Yeah.
And instead of saying, I remember how many itineraries I'd give out, an itinerary of where we're going to be, what time we're going to do this and that. And I'd say, okay, we're going to be back by the school at this time. And if I was off of that by more than 15 minutes, the parents would get upset. We've
Yeah.
been sitting in this parking lot for 30 minutes and waiting on you to get back. And then I'm like, well, we had something, deer ran in front of the bus,
Yeah.
whatever the case may be. But, so it was a difference where now on the bus, we, 10 minutes from home, 10, 20 minutes from school, we say, hey, get on the phones, call your parents, tell them to pick you up, and so the parents are, they're right there when we get there instead of me having to follow that structure and saying, okay, it's going to take us this long to eat. It's going to take us this long to get on, and be back, and hopefully within 15 minutes. I got pretty good at that. That was one of the
Yeah.
things that I got pretty good at. But that's just one of the things that in the relationship building process, that you can have a great relationship in that scenario. Some people don't think that you can, but you can have a great relationship as somebody that with a kid in that way, because a lot of kids crave that. There's a lot of kids that don't have that in their life.
Yep.
Somebody that truly cares. We live in a society today where we have a lot of kids that are coming from absentee parents,
Yep.
and just the way things are. I'm not blaming anybody, but the parent might have to have two jobs. They may not be able to go to games. They may not be able to do things, and so you can't. It's got to be that development of that relationship in that way.
Absolutely, coach. I would always caution anyone working with kids, if you're an adult, I would caution them anytime that the standard is being set that we're equals, that we're
Right.
on the same playing field. Level of care, to me, a guy that approaches a kid like they're their friend or approaches it like a coach, which you're right on the money. So many times, parenting lessons, coaching lessons, man, they parallel each other. But I think anytime it is dangerous to start, especially with that almost friendship role. In my opinion, that's the issue a lot with the select basketball world. And as part of that, I loved where when I was a select coach for Darren Williams Elite, which isn't even around anymore, which that's always kind of bugs me when those programs talk as if they are a family and they have this history. Like odds are in 5 years, it's not going to be anyway. Let me get off that. So sorry, I'll delete all of that right there. No, so but I would show up there, coach, once a week for 2 hours, and I'd train them, and they were happy to see me. I was happy to see them. I'm not their friend, but like there's no friction. And I remember thinking like this is awesome. This is sweet. But at school, I'm walking around the hallway and I see the kid that's been kicked out of class and I have to go address it. I get the email from the teacher saying, hey, this or that. They're breaking our standards in practice and I have to hold them accountable. That's where like the moment that it's a friendship, and you hear with younger coaches sometimes, even with the way, like if this is younger coaches, don't let them use your first name, in my opinion.
Right.
Like it has to be coach and last name. Coach and first name, there's just too much familiarity. And then I'm sorry for talking so long, but I also think back to my first year, year 2000, going into my first team meeting with Dave Bliss at Baylor. Literally, coach, the first thing he says is, I'm not your friend. You have enough friends. I'm your coach. I'm going to coach you about basketball. And he set that line. So we knew exactly where he stood. Now, I think, like kind of we talked about with adaptability and all of those things, there is a line with that as well. If they don't think that you care about them at all, then they're not going to care at all about what you know about the game or what you can do. So I think like we've talked about, it's about that balance, but definitely not sliding to the friend scale or the friend zone.
Yeah, and I think that speaks well. I think the accountability piece that you mentioned is so well. I mean, AAU and high school basketball sometimes, or select league, kind of has a little bit of a friction sometimes, but I think that's probably what, speaking from the high school coach, and you kind of alluded to this, there's no accountability on select. It's those 2 hours a week or whatever the practice is. It doesn't matter what the grades are in school. It doesn't matter how they're acting in school.
They love me and I love them. They were great, and I had no clue if they were turds or not.
Right, and so on the other end of it, we got to factor in all that kind of stuff. So but we can't get the kids. There's things that select can do that we can't. If we have a legitimate kid that we feel like can play at that next level, we can't get them the look, the exposure that a select can, because our season's going on at the same time the college season is going on. And so now the elite ones, they'll make Rodney Terry, he'll leave practice, get on the plane, and go visit a kid for that elite kid. But for a kid that's just maybe they're not gonna take away from their season. To do that, and that's completely understandable. So we got to figure out. We work hand in hand with that. But a big piece to that culture, I think, is getting that relationship, going back to the culture, is developing those relationships, encouraging the kids. And I think a big thing is, if you truly believe in what you're doing and you love what you're doing, I think that'll permeate to the kids. I think I know that, this is one thing. I go back to my first year as a head coach. We were playing a team. We were terrible. Oh my gosh. We were 6-20. We were 6-24 that year. We were playing, so there's 2 games in district. We won 2 district basketball games. The first one, somehow I convinced the other coach, to play his home district game at the Summit in front of the Rockets game. I don't know how I did that, but I convinced him, because we're going to play in front of the Rockets. You know how they do those quarter whatever. So we did that. And our game goes into overtime, and the Rockets people are trying to, we got to get off the court. And people are saying, I'm sorry, this is a district game. We can't quit. Anyway, they're playing the old Seattle Supersonics that night. But the funny thing about it was that was with Gary Payton and Sean Kemp. And they came out in the Seattle Supersonics in their warm-up, sat on the front row and watched the overtime of the game. If I was a kid playing that, I would have never forgotten that. And we won that game in overtime. And then the other one was, though, we were playing it. They were ranked in the top. I think they were ranked in the top 15. It was a team in the district, and the coach that was knew my dad and was very. He knew that he was a great coach, and so this was my first year coaching. So he went into that game. I could see it on his face. He had a little bit of little fearful, and that permeated his whole team. And we won that game by like 20 points. Over a ranked team, and we won 6 games all year. But that's showing you what kids, how they respond to the leader. And ever since after that game, those kids went on a roll and had a great, went several rounds in the playoffs. But that just kind of speaks to the kids. If you believe in it, loving it, they're going to buy into it, and they're going to be more successful than they probably would have been otherwise.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.